I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 138 of the Future Template Parent podcast. I am really excited to have as my guest today, Liz Zhou, LPC, who is a therapist in Colorado. So thank you, Liz, so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Carolyn. I'm excited to try.
So first, I'm just going to quickly read the bio that you provided to me, just so everyone knows a little bit more about you, what you do, and then we can go from there. So, all right. So Liz Zhou, she, her, is a neurodivergent therapist of color based in Colorado. She helps highly sensitive neurodivergent adults and couples heal their nervous systems and connect with their authentic selves. Her specialties include brain spotting, EMDR, IFS, psychedelic integration, and nervous system intensives. Deep dive accelerated therapy. When Liz isn't meeting with clients, she's building delightful websites for fellow therapists and coaches so they can connect with their ideal clients and share their unique gifts with the world. Oh, how great that you offer that service as well. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
So what I usually ask people first is, what was your journey like to becoming an EMDR therapist, to becoming a therapist, to sort of being at the point you're at right now in your career?
Yeah. So I'd say I've always felt an affinity toward like the helping profession, caregiving, just really like nurturing mental health. So from very early on in my education, like high school and then college, I was taking psychology courses. I majored in psychology in Vermont, which I know you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then after graduating with just a BA in psychology, I ended up having an opportunity to travel abroad and do some research as well as like work study experiences abroad. And it led me to actually volunteering at some plant medicine centers in South America. In Peru and in Ecuador and Colombia. And the focus of my research was on like mental health across cultures. So I ended up in actually the world of holistic healing, plant medicines, shamanism. I worked even as a translator for a shaman at a plant medicine center in Peru, since I speak Spanish fluently as well as English. So I would help translate ceremonies and healing sessions between the shaman and guests who would come.
That's
so
amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that was my context between undergrad and then eventually my time in South America started to wrap up. I was kind of drawn to come back to the States. So I ended up choosing a graduate program in mindfulness-based transpersonal counseling in Boulder, Colorado, because I really wanted to study psychotherapy. That was always kind of the plan in the background to become a therapist someday. But I knew I wanted a program that also integrated holistic healing, psychedelic assisted therapy, spirituality, things like that. So I did that program. I did it throughout the pandemic. So that was an interesting added layer of that. And then my final year, I did internships, started getting clinical experience. And it was all just confirming that I wanted to be a therapist. And then my internship site wanted us to be trained in trauma-informed modalities. So they had us train in EMDR pretty early on. So that was great.
At your internship site?
Yes.
That's, wow.
Ideal.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So that was my intro to trauma-focused therapy. I loved it. The training was a bit exhausting and a lot to digest, but I realized like as we were going through, I'm like, oh, this is so applicable to the clients I work with. The resourcing, right? The reprocessing, just the concept of like moving experiences through the nervous system, through sensation and negative cognitions and all that. Right. So I'll just pause here, but that's basically winding
path. So much there. So wow. Where was your internship site? What kind of work were you doing in that? location, and what kind of a great place provides EMDR training for interns?
Yeah, it was a lovely experience. So it's called Boulder Emotional Wellness, and they're a community mental health center in Boulder, Colorado.
Cool.
So they take on, grad interns, train them really well, and get them trained in EMDR.
That's wonderful. And did you stay on with them after graduation, or were you kind of ready to do your own thing at that point? Or
so it was a bit of both. This site was unique in that it actually helped us to step into private practice directly from internship. So they allowed us to actually take our caseload with us. Most of them were like Medicaid or marketplace insurance clients. Billing through the community health center, I was able to start off my private practice that way and have a more seamless transition than most people get to have, which I'm really...
such a beautiful model.
Yeah.
Wow. There's so much that's just so great. I mean, I think, for so many people, I think those early years of post-grad can be, I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm sure there was a lot of challenges in that as well, but I think they can be really difficult years where you don't feel like you're able to meet your needs, your clients' needs, and it can be, and you don't feel supported. And it sounds like maybe you had a different experience, which is wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I feel lucky that I got much more layers of support and just more ease than is often available in this field, which is a really tough field to enter and to stay in and to be well in. So
all those things. And, it's like you say you feel lucky, which absolutely true. And it's like, what do we need to do to get more places to be structured that way? And what would that do for the longevity of people's careers and the burnout and all those things? The cumulative stress that a lot of people start accumulating in graduate school.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's
and
really
I don't.
Cool.
Yeah, and this makes me think that I don't know how I would have fared if I'd had to completely go off on my own after internship, right? If I didn't have that stepping stone right into a practice that was mine. Because I don't know, just kind of the expectations or pressures of agency work or just the pace of that or other I'm not sure how that would have panned out for me personally.
Yeah. I think it sets people's expectations in a certain way. And I think there's different challenges. I think, as someone who was in agency work for several years, there was a lot of growth that happened for me there. And, it was very difficult. So, I wouldn't go back and change it now necessarily, but it's wonderful to hear about a model like that exists.
Yeah.
So how long was the graduate program? How many years?
It was 3 years.
Oh, it was. Okay. Yeah. And again, that feels, a lot of places are 2, and that feels a little sometimes truncated. I mean, mine was 2 and it felt a little short. So no, really cool. That's great. I'm glad to hear about that. Yeah. So you started your practice and you were already EMDR trained. So what did it look like for you, moving, building that something that was your own, and incorporating EMDR, and kind of where did you go from there?
Oh gosh. Yeah. It's so funny because I didn't realize going into private practice how much it would bring up. Like in my mind, it was like, just start the practice. There were definitely fears and nervousness around that, especially since that wasn't the typical path people took right after grad school. But in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to do that and focus on that. I didn't know it'd be so emotionally activating or personally just like identity upheaval, like who am I to run my own business? Like, am I allowed to, right? And going from looking more to like others to give me permission for every single step of like, am I doing this right? To becoming a little bit more self-trusting and self-led of like, yes, of course I'm working in the parameters of ethicality and safety and clinical effectiveness and best practices, but also like I get to choose if I work Monday at 10 a.m. or 8 a.m., right? I get to choose if I see people on Fridays or not, when I take breaks. And then doing all the math around that, and then fees and all that the money stuff brings up, and and all this whole time, I'm a highly sensitive person, right? Like my own nervous system has its own limitations, as we all do. So I was kind of running up against that as well. Like if the expectation I was taught is that, new clinicians see 30 to 40 client hours a week, like what does it mean that I feel like fried at 18,
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's such a struggle that I think so many people feel, and feel afraid to speak aloud, tell their supervisor, admit to a colleague, because it feels wrong somehow.
Yeah.
Not to mention the money stuff, because of course, and I think a lot of us, our capacity is, like, I see a lot of, I think we can tell ourselves one number, and over the course of the work often realize it's a lower number, I guess is what I'll say. But obviously, I'm sure there was money stuff that had to come, like you said, do the math, right? And what was that like? Share as much as you feel comfortable sharing. Of course, I know it can be a sensitive topic, but a lot of us have been on this journey about, how do I make this sustainable on many levels? And money's part of it,
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh, there's so much. Because I think it's such a mental flip to go from like me doing my unpaid practicum, my unpaid internship. That was also the nature of the situation, to then, oh, I'm starting to get paid. And then like that being really exciting. And then really starting to crunch the numbers a bit more. And it's like, okay, how many client sessions do I need per week and per month to actually not just meet my basic needs, but exceed them, start to have savings, right? Have something beyond just like living from one month to another, which was kind of the grad school energy for me. So what I noticed for myself is that, kind of with the insurance payouts, the rates that insurance providers are contracted to pay or willing to pay, right? And then there's like kind of a cut that gets taken out when I'm billing through another organization. So then kind of what I got left with, well, then I had to take the self-employment taxes out of that. And then it's like, oh, this seems less than the original number I was seeing.
Absolutely.
So it was actually, it was uncomfortable, and it was a little bit scary to feel at certain points like this treadmill of like, okay, am I full yet in the practice? I feel emotionally, if I feel energetically full at capacity, financially something is still missing, or it still feels a little frantic. So that's what led me to pivot more to figuring out how to connect with more private pay clients, and then eventually intensives down the road. But that's where the financial stuff started, when the math just was not adding up in a way that I needed.
Absolutely. And like you were mentioning, sort of like nervous system safety, it's very hard to feel grounded when you are financially unstable. And that's, I think, a struggle a lot of people moving into private practice, experience, and have to find their way through. And so I think it's always really validating to hear other people's stories in that, on that journey. Before we sort of transition to EMDR intensives and intensives more generally, because I know you practice a lot of modalities, which is awesome. Oh my goodness. Oh yes, right. I wanted to connect a little bit with you mentioned being highly sensitive and also identifying as neurodivergent. And I was wondering if you felt comfortable sharing anything about how that's played into all of this and your journey. Yeah, because I think people would be really interested in that.
Yes, I'm happy to share. And it's such a relatable topic. I think it touches people in a lot of different ways. So I'm highly sensitive, and then I'm also autistic, and so I just kind of call that like neurodivergent, highly, it's an umbrella. And it was actually across the course of grad school, in the early stages of building a practice, that I became more intimately familiar with my neurodivergent traits, and like really started to understand how they were like impacting the way I was experiencing the world, why certain things felt a bit harder for me, that didn't seem as hard for other people. And vice versa, why like my brain would seem to work differently in certain areas compared to others. And I'm just reflecting on what would feel important to share. So at first, and especially the way I was trained in grad school, it was this like blank slate, like don't tell anyone, right? Like just kind of keep it to yourself. They weren't saying it that specifically, but that's what I internalized, of like, we are here to be kind of a neutral presence. And and then as my like sensitivity, my neurodivergence just became so interlinked with like how I was building my private practice, And I was realizing I wanted to work with more clients who had that shared lived experience, because I felt like I could support some of these people. Not if I was going through the exact same thing they were going through, but maybe if I'm like 2 steps ahead or 2 steps removed from what they're going through, like that we can connect over that lived experience. So that's when I started to lean more into sharing about my like authentic self more, in more ways on my website, in my marketing and my networking, when introducing myself to new clients on consult calls, just making it clear, like, I'm here to be your therapist and hold space for you. And if it's important for you to know that and connect with someone who understands what it's like to live in a sensitive nervous system, or to feel like different, or their wiring just doesn't match the environment that we're placed in. And that became a thread throughout my work, and that actually helped me niche down and start getting more private pay clients too, because I was getting very niched and specialized and speaking specifically to that population that I felt most connected to clinically and personally.
And I'm so glad that is becoming more normalized in our field and celebrated. And also I think it's, the idea of the blank slate, I have reflected on this a lot. There are some identities that aren't immediately visible, and there are lots that are. So no matter what, we're not a blank slate. You know what I mean? And so I just think it's just been, I found it encouraging and heartwarming to see how that has evolved. And I think people being very thoughtful about it, and also sometimes we mess up in that. And how beautiful that is when we can be authentic about that, right? That maybe we say something that, oh, you know what? I realize that may have been more about me, and how did that feel to you? Like that's just, it's a real relationship, and we're being human,
Yes. And even just hearing that, like, something in me softens of like, like, as humans, and like we say things and it's like it's imperfect, and that's the point, and then we repair, and that's what makes a human.
Exactly. And rupture and repair being such a part of the work. And sort of thinking about intensives too, like something I've thought a lot about too is what does that look like in an intensive? I think is an interesting question, because I'm just naming that, because and let's switch to talking about intensives a bit, but when we think of intensives as like a slightly different container where there isn't always necessarily that ongoing relationship, although there can be, what does rupture and repair look like? But that's just a topic for another day probably, but I was thinking about that in another context, and I just think it's really interesting how there's a lot of different things can happen in different containers. Anyway, I'm in a philosophical Friday afternoon state of mind, I think.
I love that. Yes.
But moving to intensive. So first of all, I knew what I was going to ask. When did you start your private practice?
I started it in early 2023. So a few years in practice.
Okay. And you came out of grad school with EMDR training. What, how has your practice evolved? And like, how did you come to intensives? All that stuff.
Yes.
What's that been like?
Yes. So I remember I was so excited when I like landed on a name for my practice. I'm like, yes, I'm going to call it Seasons of Growth Counseling. It just felt so, it's like when you name, like a pet, or it's like, yes, that's the name. So I started off very generalized because my training was generalized. I was working with all types of clients in community mental health. And I'm really glad that I got that breadth of experience. And so I went into private practice open to anyone who wants to work with me. My only limitation was like they had to be 18 plus, because I knew I didn't want to work with teens or kids. So doors were all open, but it was oddly like quiet and crickets. I'm like, what? I'm open to everyone. And then when I started niching down, that's when more people started coming and becoming clients, because and it also helped me feel less burnt out in the marketing, and less like I had to try so hard just to get anyone, right? Because once I got more specific, then my clients felt like I was actually speaking to them. And then it was less mental gymnastics for me to write my website to speak to everyone. And instead I could to speak to a specific person. So it got easier as I narrowed in. And so I'd say within a year of me being in my first year of practice, I I definitely had a goal of getting more private pay clients. And then I started to slowly raise my fee from maybe like 120 was my starting fee, like to 150 and then to 160 an hour. And then just like slowly inching it up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started hearing about therapy intensives as a concept. So then I started to look into some different resources of how to market that, how to structure that, drew from, just some different resources and programs and put together my own intensive package. And I started out very uncertain because a part of me, most parts of me still didn't believe I could do it. In my mind, I'm like, oh, other people can do it, but maybe for me, it's like maybe. And so I started with kind of low confidence, low trust in myself. And the main marketing strategy I started to use the most was SEO via blogging. I was networking, talking to other clinicians, spreading the word. I was like responding to Facebook posts in referral groups, but it was still slow. And then I learned about how blogging can really help to build like topical authority in the Google search engine. I love writing. That's like one of my love languages with myself. So I'm like, there's so much knowledge I want to share with people. There's a psychoeducation I give to every client anyway. Let me just put it in some blogs. So I started basically like weekly blogging practice near the end of 2023. And within a few months, I saw that was starting to get more clicks to my website for very relevant search inquiries. That was converting into some inquiries. Some of those inquiries were converting into some full fee private pay clients. This was still the weekly model, because that was all I knew how to talk about.
Right,
It was the only thing my nervous system knew was possible as a structure. So there was like a period of maybe 3 to 5 months where I had an intensives page on my site, and I was technically like, I do intensives, but I hadn't booked one. And that was partly because of my own mental just uncertainty, as well as maybe it was just taking some time for those clients to find me too. Like it could be both. I think what helped shift things was, so this whole time I'd actually been working online only. I chose not to like sublet or rent an office in the Boulder area just because I preferred to work online just to start, and partly to keep expenses low, but partly because I liked online work and most of my clients were online anyway. But then I ended up making a really good connection and a new friend in Denver, Colorado, about an hour from where I was living. And they had an amazing office. Like I fell in love with it. They were also a neurodivergent clinician. So the office was beautifully decorated, sensory soothing. It was just like, I immediately felt myself relax when I walked in, and I asked her, can I sublet this on the weekends? Because maybe I'm curious if I could do an intensive here in person. And I wondered if maybe that was part of my block, that I wasn't comfortable offering a longer session online to start with, that I felt like I wanted to be in the room with the client. And so my friend and we signed a sublet contract, and then within 2 to 3 weeks, I booked my first intensive in person in Denver.
Amazing.
So 3-hour session in person in that beautiful office. And from there, once I got that experience of holding space for that 3 hours, the client outcome from that intensive was really positive. That's when it felt like it unlocked a dam. And then from then on, when came in, sometimes they would say, well, maybe I want to do weekly, maybe I want to do intensive. I would talk to them on the consult call, and we would figure out like which one was actually the best fit, because I was offering both. And so for those who the intensive was the best fit, I would get them signed up, and suddenly I was doing like 2 to 3 intensives per month in that Denver office, driving an hour to get there, but it was still worth it. And I built the driving time into my intensive fees, because that's what made sense.
That's amazing.
So then it just kind of unlocked, and so from then on, and then as I did more, I even started doing longer ones, like 6-hour days instead of 3-hour days for more intense cases that had really good outcomes for those that it was appropriate for. And then I'll end this share by saying my life has actually been changing a lot in the background, just across the whole phase of my private practice. I've moved 2 to 3 times within like Colorado. In this past year, I actually moved out of Colorado, and my partner and I started RVing. So now I'm back fully online again. I don't have office anywhere. So then I had to switch the intensive format back to online when my life changed. I can talk more about that, but I guess like what I like is that the intensive model can flex with me. It doesn't need to. It's changed as my season of life has changed.
I love that. I think that's such an important message, and I tell people that all the time. It really can meet your needs. And, allow yourself to believe that and like envision what that can look like. If you don't mind sharing about the sort of RV life and what that looks like, I think people would love to hear how that's impacting your practice, what what your work looks like now?
Yeah, would love to share, because I really want people to know it's possible, and it can look a lot of different ways. Because even when I was starting RV life with my husband, I was like, am I going to be able to run my practice? Like, how is this going to work? How's the internet going to be in the middle of nature? And it's been working. So, and just for context, we left Colorado kind of middle of 2025, and then started RVing kind of in the summer of 25.
Okay.
So
it's been about 7 or 8 months, or 6 or 7 months. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So what that looks like is, like, really not that much has changed. We use Starlink. If people want to know that's been effective. I've used other roaming internets too, but Starlink has been the best for our needs. We have a fifth wheel, so we live in a 35-foot fifth wheel, and then our truck pulls it. And right now we're parked in New Mexico, but we plan to switch locations and maybe try out the West Coast later this year. And basically, I have a little office space in the back of the fifth wheel, so it's a totally private space. It has a door, like I can do all my sessions here. And for the intensives, basically I switched from doing in a format of 90-minute intake session online, 3 to 6 hours in person, and then like a 20-minute follow-up. That's like my base intensive package for Denver in person. I decided to switch that to a 90-minute intake and then a 90-minute intensive session scheduled on a different day, and then another 90-minute session scheduled within a week of that. So it's 3 1.5-hour sessions scheduled within 1 to 2 weeks. And some people might see that as like, oh, those are just like longer sessions. And they are. Like, that's, to me, that's an intensive too. Like, an intensive can be as short as 90 minutes.
It can be what you make it and what you want it to be, and what oh my gosh, what intentions you bring to it, I think, is part of it too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how you frame it for the client and yourself.
Yes. Yeah. So
that's so cool. That's so cool.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and I decided I just didn't have the stamina personally to sit through a 3-hour session online.
That is very long.
I know some people do, and that can work well, but just for my nervous system, it doesn't. So I needed to make sure my new online only intensives actually fit what I could offer, because that's the only way it's going to be helpful to my clients. I can't be doing it in a strained, burnt out way, because then the client outcomes are going to suffer as well.
Absolutely.
So I just switched up the language on my website. I start, like, when I got new inquiries, I would just explain to them, because some people were still finding me through the SEO of my Denver intensives page. But they a lot of them were just already connected to or like the idea of working with me, and it was less important to them whether it was online or in person. So those are the folks on consult calls that I could share with them, hey, I'm doing this online. What do you think of accelerated therapy, 3 90-minute sessions in 2 weeks? And then if they choose to continue after that, we can do 90-minute sessions bi-weekly, monthly, to kind of maintain, fine-tune, keep up the results, or they might go back to their primary therapist, or that's like kind of what they needed for that chapter. So some people feel complete with that. It's 4.5 clinical hours, and that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's a lot of work if you approach it with the intention and structure that it needs to have. Yeah, for sure. I have so many questions, but I'm wondering about sort of specializing and working with neurodivergent people. How do you find, I think we had talked about this a little bit before, how you find that the intensive model really aligns for a lot of people who identify as neurodivergent. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yes. And honestly, like, my heart goes out, because a lot of the neurodivergent clients that I've spoken to, like my own personal experience too, is that it can feel like the mental health field, or like healthcare, wasn't even built for, like, with a neurodivergent person in mind. It's definitely getting better, but just that that so many things can be non-affirming or inaccessible or just sensory overwhelming, or those barriers. And so some people just even having a hesitant or distrusting or unsafe relationship with the medical system, and not just neurodivergent folks, like people of color, like just so many communities have this strained relationship. So what I like about intensives is it's basically saying, hey, look, I see that this weekly therapy model, like, for whatever reason, hasn't resonated with you, hasn't worked for you, doesn't fit with your life, especially if they're busy, like parent, or like their schedule is just inconsistent. Like, and intensives are really offering like a way for the care to be accessible in a different way. for the care to actually like meet the needs of their brain and their wiring, rather than the client feeling like they're bad at therapy because they've been doing these 50-minute sessions for months, but nothing's changing.
Yeah.
And especially for neurodivergent folks, most of my clientele, they're autistic, they're ADHD, or they're ADHD, highly sensitive, gifted, like kind of that umbrella, as well as complex trauma. So, they, some people find that just the extended time of 3 hours instead of 1, or 1.5 hours instead of 1 hour, makes them feel safer to actually let their guard down, right? Like work through their protector parts that maybe keep them really buttoned up and held together for 40 minutes, right? But then how long can you keep that up if it's a longer session? And that can be in service of the client to like, wow, look, we don't have to wrap up at 53 minutes. What happens inside you when you know that we have 30 more minutes to be with this? I know for myself, I get, like I'm more willing to go toward the deep thing, go toward the thing that needs my attention, rather than start to like lock myself back up into my protect, right? Because that's so human to like, why would I want to open up this door in the last session?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
It's so funny. I feel like in grad school, so many of us heard about like the doorknob moment, right? Like as the client is leaving. And what if that is because partly it's just not enough time. And also the sense of like, let me say this when I'm on my way out, but like we are creating a space in which some of those barriers are taken away by the structure. And that's so powerful.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how the doorknob moment or confession is like this trope in therapy, and like we've all had it, but I'm like, what if it didn't have to be that way? Like,
exactly. Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think just creating a framework that's you're going to have the time you need. Like it's not, we don't have to be watching the clock the whole time. And, and really with one eye on the clock, are you really, how can you be grounded and dropped in and attuned to what's going on internally? It just seems very difficult to do that.
Exactly.
I mean, I've seen the evidence that it's very difficult for people, and the difference that so much time and space makes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in that way, like it's so beneficial, not just for folks who identify as neurodivergent, but anyone, like whether they identify with anything at all, right? Just that like, a lot of our systems could use more space. And also intensives kind of, I feel like it's a really healthy challenge to this idea of like, we need to fit our healing into this lunch hour,
Like, and then go back to work, meet with your boss right away, come on.
Right. Yeah. Which is so like like the capitalism of like, this needs to look efficient, or like this needs to fit neatly and it can't disrupt anything else. Right. And
absolutely. It has nothing to do with clinical appropriateness. It's everything about what insurance companies dictate, right? That's what gave us that model, So my gosh, I have so many more questions, but we're going to run out of time. But I have one more that I definitely want to get to, and that's your website building work for therapists and coaches. I'd love to know how you came to that as a specialty. It sounds like you've certainly done a great job on your own website. What that looks like, how that plays into your overall, work-life balance and all that stuff.
Yeah. So with my website work, that I started to realize how much I enjoy like tinkering around on a website as I was building my own practice. And at this point, my website is the main source of my referrals through like people Google searching like key terms that I show up for. So as I was like seeing how effective little tweaks and strategic decisions on my website were for marketing my practice, I started to just share that with like other therapist friends, people in the field of like, oh, this worked for me. Or people would comment on my website and say, oh, like it looks really cool. And like, how did you do that? Or like, who did that? And I'd say, And so it kind of naturally rolled into like me realizing, and this kind of goes back to capacity and like flexibility, like what intensives can allow us to do, where as I was booking more intensives, seeing more of my therapy income come from those condensed hours and for me, I do bill those at a higher fee, which I know is kind of, what we talk about in the intensive. So that opened up space for me to be less on the treadmill of like, okay, every week I need to see this amount of weekly clients. And if someone cancels, then that throws everything right. And more like, yeah, this month I booked 2 to 3 intensives. That's great. That's a great. And then it opened up more time and space for my brain to basically pursue my other like special interests, which is design and writing. So started doing website projects for friends who needed websites. They kind of led to other word of mouth referrals. And so now then I built another LLC and just started offering like website packages for people who just straight up need that support, want to outsource it or want like another pair of eyes on their online presence.
Oh, that's amazing. And I know people listening would be interested in that. Do you take on, you have like availability for clients? Oh, great. Wonderful. Because I'm sure people will be really interested in that. That's great.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with folks who might want to book me for a project, whether that's like just their intensives page, just that service page, or like more of a website revamp. So,
oh, wonderful. Well, definitely all that information will be in the show notes so people can access it. And then I think the one other question I was thinking about was, for you as someone who identifies as neurodivergent and highly sensitive, how do intensives feel to you as a professional?
Oh, it just brings a smile to my face because although I am really new to the field, like I've had moments from early on where I'm like, I don't know how long I'll last here if I had to keep doing it the standard way. Intensives changed that. It felt like this like ticket to freedom, which is maybe a dramatic, but I'm like, oh my gosh, because it just fit. And like to go full circle, it felt like the work I was doing at the plant medicine centers when I would translate ceremonies and those are like plant medicine ceremonies are they're 3 to 4 hours. Funny how that matches up with the intensive, and I saw how deep those ceremonies would be. So anyway, so for me as a practitioner, I feel like I can go deeper like in guiding the client, and it also feels easier on my nervous system because even though intensive work can be intense experientially, it also means that like I could have one day where I do a 1 3-hour session and that's it. And that to me feels so much easier than 3 1-hour sessions with 3 different people. Because 3 1-hour sessions in a day, which at this point is my clinical limit, which I didn't think I'd say like even 2 years ago, right? Like that's 3 task switch, maybe 6 if you think about like entering and then ending, entering, ending, entering, ending. It's a lot of transitioning energy between like I'm attuning to person A, now I'm attuning to person B. So that requires energy, or like spoons in neurodivergent talk. And then and then the work itself might feel disrupted because there might be a doorknob thing at the end of a 50-minute session, or it's like, okay, let's get to that next week, but then it's like, who knows what's going to happen between now and next week. So it feels, my brain feels more organized when I'm doing intensives because it's less hopping around and more deep hyper focus, which is what my brain likes to do.
Yeah. Oh, that makes so much sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything, this has been delightful. Is there anything else you would like to share that you wanted to make sure we touched on that I haven't asked, or that you would like people to know?
Yeah, I mean, this has been so lovely to chat through it. I guess if I want people to leave with anything, because I know it's a lot of therapists listen, it's what helped me is kind of like putting it out there first, and that like I don't wait for my brain to catch up to like, yeah, you can do this. I put it out there first, and then I let my nervous system brain catch up, right? So when I raise my fees, it's like, just put the number there, take a deep breath, go like talk to your therapist about how you feel about that. And that, but like, then like, I don't have to be 100% ready to do the thing. I just have to be ready-ish or willing to take a step. And just like I put the intensives page on my site before my parts were really on board with actually offering it, like that's what I mean. I like do the thing first, like, and let your nervous system catch up if what you've been doing so far isn't working. That would be my advice.
I think that is so true. And I think that there is a lot of this, well, I'm not ready. And what does that mean? Where is that coming from? Like you said, what parts are being activated that are really sort of protecting a very some of those fears and some of those fears of, failure, rejection, whatever it is, it's some of the best ways to work through that is to just do the thing and have some self-trust. Like you said, be more like a little bit self-led and say, I figured things out before, I will figure this out. Yeah. And it's okay if we make a mistake or we do something wrong. Like that's being human, and we adjust, and no one's harder on us than we are on ourselves, pretty much, usually, most of the time.
Yeah.
And so I think all of us can benefit from that message of just do the thing and you will figure it out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to remind myself every single day.
Oh,
so.
Me too.
Yeah.
Multiple times a day. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so glad that you reached out to me and we connected. And I know people are going to love hearing about all the things you're doing and how you're creating this life for yourself that your work is in service to in so many beautiful ways, that it's not about how do I fit my, here's the box and I have to figure out how to make it work. It's like, no, you can make your own container that works for you. And that's the best way to do it. That's the best for you and for your clients.
Yeah.
So,
100%.
So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.